Hey folks, can you hear me and see me? Somebody give me a yes or a thumbs up or anything else just so that I know I'm coming through. Excellent. Thank you, Max. Very good. So, I'm a little late this month coming on here. I usually like to get started doing our first live stream earlier in the month, but I was actually, as most of y'all know, I'm talking about this for those of you who aren't on social media. I was in Texas competing in my very first karate tournament. And even before that, I had gotten really sick. I got sick and I was in bed all the way up until the day before the tournament. I just, and by that point, I was over most of the sickness. I was just really weak and tired and exhausted, but I was determined I was not going to miss this thing. I had been, you know, training for this harder than I had ever physically trained for anything in my life. And I've been looking forward to it so much because it was my first one. And I just wanted to get the experience of it, just to see what it was like, see if I liked it or not, if it was something that I wanted to pursue more of in the future. Uh, so I got up out of bed after being really sick and drove for 5.5 hours to get to Houston, Texas. And it actually ended up going much, much better than I thought it would. Now, keep in mind, my category, there aren't, like, most people that compete at things like this, like, by far the vast majority of the people in this competition were black belts. At least a black belt, if not like second, third, or even there weren't very many fourth degree competing. Fourth degree is like a master. Most of the masters were like judges and things like that, but you had lots of like second and third degree black belts in this thing. Like, out of the entire competition, there were probably about 110 people, and almost all of them honestly were black belts. There were, in my division, in the beginners division, there were only 6 of us. It was a really small tournament compared to even pre-COVID. They said before COVID, this thing was like 2.5 times the size that it is now. So keep in mind, I was not competing against black belts, just people pretty much any level before black belt. Like, there was a red belt, there was a blue belt, there was one woman that was between orange and green. What else? Just in that general area. I'm prefacing this just so you know that I wasn't competing like against any of the black belts or masters or anything like that. Just to but the thing is, I was by far still the lowest ranking belt there. I was the only white belt in the entire competition. So I went there thinking, yeah, don't get me wrong, I trained harder, like I said, harder for this than I've ever trained for anything in my life. But I went there just thinking, okay, I'm just going to do the best I can do and just get the experience of this. I'm not going there expecting, to win anything or anything else. That said, I came away from it doing far better than I even expected to do. And in the beginners division in my group, I got third place. Karate Masters Invitational, third place. Even came home with a little trophy, which I was very, very pleased about. Yeah, so hopefully this will end up being the first of many. I was really, really excited, happy, came away from it doing much better than I thought I was going to do. Thanks, guys. Thank y'all. But I was pretty proud of myself. But one of the reasons I'm bringing this up, in addition to just, why I've been late this month, I was in New York competing in the tournament, driving back and forth, all that kind of stuff. But one of the other reasons that I was talking about this is because I got to tell you. Another thing I think that helped in the tournament was the fact that I've been boxing, for a while, which kind of gave me a heads up, or gave me a like a little bit of a advantage over people who were just starting to practice, period. So it's like, yeah, I was a white belt, but I'm also a white belt who at least knew how to box. So that gave me a little bit of an advantage. But the reason I'm bringing this up and talking about this is because I'm realizing how much I love this, how much I love the practice of karate. When I was a kid, when I was a child, this was something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to learn. There were only two things in my life that I was that called to me. It's like when we're doing the magnum opus stuff now and we're talking about raising herbs, one of the things we're doing in the magnum opus classes is where talking, just getting them into practices that are tied into the element of earth. And one of the things we were doing is telling them, you're going to raise an herb or a plant that you're going to use in an alchemical experience. You're going to nurture this thing. You're going to be doing ritual work on it every day. But when you go to pick it out, don't just go and randomly grab anything, like the first thing that crosses your path. Try to just, as hippie and ridiculous as this might sound, we're telling them to go in and try to feel the plants, like try to commune with them, I guess you would say, and try to find one that calls to you, that speaks to you. A lot of times in life that's a subtle thing, but a lot of times it can also be a very loud, powerful thing. Like sometimes it's just a small, tiny inner voice. Other times it is an incredibly loud sonic boom. For me, like when I heard those sonic booms, when it was like I came awake and aware and became conscious in this life, the first time would have been, when I was no older than 6 or 7 years old, and I came across the first book on Magick, or an advertisement for a first book on Magick. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew. I knew when I saw that, it was like everything in me said, that's what I want to do. I knew to the core of my soul. It was like it was a calling to me. I knew that was what I wanted to do. No question in my mind. I mean, it was so loud that from that moment on, I never cared about anything else. I never went through that stuff that little kids go through where they think, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. I want to be a cop when I grow up. I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. Whatever it is. For me, I didn't care about any of that stuff anymore. All I knew is I wanted to do magic, whatever it was. I didn't even understand what it was yet. For all I knew, it could have been Harry Potter stuff, but I knew I wanted to do that. The only other thing that has ever been like that in my life was karate. And I don't mean martial arts in general. I am not interested in, I'll watch MMA on TV or whatever if it happens to be on. It's vaguely interesting to me, but that's not a thing that called to me. Or kung fu, or any of those kinds of things. They were fine or whatever, but there was just some. It's the same way with Magick. No other spiritual tradition in the world a lot of them do the same thing that Magick does, but none of them called to me. None of them spoke to me. None of them gave me that sonic boom the way that Magick did. It was the same way with karate in martial arts. The rest just did not call to me. They did not speak to me. And maybe it was because of the time period when I grew up, 70s, 80s, whatever. But one of the things that I'm realize, when I left New York, and I realize this is a long ass story, but just bear with me. When I left New York, I didn't feel any desire for anything anymore. In a lot of ways, I felt like I was just, I left New York with the attitude of, okay, I'm just going to the best of my ability, try to enjoy my life. And, I didn't put it this way in like a nihilistic, like existential angst sort of way or whatever. But in certain ways, it was like I really was just kind of waiting to die. Like I felt like I had done everything I wanted to do in the world. The thing that had always appealed to me the most, that I'd always wanted to do the most, was write a book on magic. And I'd written 3 of them. And I felt like I got that out of my system. Like I don't have the urge to write any more books on magic, to be honest. I felt like when I did it, like I poured my soul into it. Like I put a part of myself into those books when I wrote them. And I'm very happy with them, and I'm very pleased with them. And I felt like I had done a huge chunk of what I wanted to do in this world. But now with karate, it feels like I'm living again, like I'm pursuing something. And I really do believe one of the things, if not the thing, that makes us the happiest in life is you have to be pursuing something. You have to be pursuing a goal of some sort, something that you want in some way. And I don't think it works as well if it's like a material thing. I think it works to a certain extent. Like for example, if there's always a place that you wanted to live your entire life, say you were born in the backwoods of Alabama somewhere, and you had always dreamed about making your way to New York City and living in that environment. I think that very definitely, absolutely can be one of those things. But for the most part, I think more often than not, it's not like a material thing to set a goal for. More often than not, it's some form of transformation, like something you want to do, something you want to become, something you want to pour yourself into that's going to change you by teaching you things, making you understand things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like in a metaphysical sense. For some people, there are people who, for example, love working on cars. They just want to take them apart and put them together, and they love doing that. So I don't even think it necessarily has to be like in a metaphysical sense. But when you do things like that, you're learning, you're growing. And when you learn and grow, you change. You're not stagnating. That's the thing. It has to be something that prevents you from stagnating. Crowley had a famous quote. He said something about the worst thing that a person could possibly do is set an attainable goal for themselves. Because once you attain that goal, then what else is there for you to work for? What else is there for you to do? You've reached the peak. Now you're going to be standing there like, okay, I thought this was the finish line, but I reached the finish line. Now what? I'm still here. What do I do? Just retire, go for leisurely walks and try to enjoy my day. That's what I felt like I was doing in New York. By the time, after I'd put those 3 books on magic out and everything else, and doing this now has given me, it's lit a fire in me again. And I love what I am doing, and I am filled with desire to constantly learn more. Yeah, Bait Nurse says so many people die after they retire. And I see a lot of y'all have made comments. I don't know if there's questions or anything. I'll go back and read those in a minute. I just don't want to get distracted right now, so I'm not looking at them. But the thing is, one other thing. When I was in prison, and I was trying to learn some of these rituals, the Rose Cross ritual in particular. It's one of those that can seem a little complicated in the beginning because with most of these other rituals, you're doing something that's pretty easily visualized. Like when you're doing the pentagram rituals and the hexagram rituals and all that, you're drawing a circle around the room, which you're then closing into a sphere. But when you start doing the rose cross ritual, you're drawing a three-dimensional cube or square, and you're inside of it. And it doesn't go by the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. It's like, the corners like northwest and southeast and all this sort of stuff. And it was really, really hard in the beginning. After you get it, after you figure it out, you're like, oh, why did I ever think that was so hard? But when I was trying to learn it in the beginning, I've talked about this before, how I would walk around the room and I would have the book in one hand, and with the other hand, I'm trying to draw the crosses and the circles and the lines connecting. And it's like, it says go to this corner and then trace a line to this corner and then up to the ceiling and all this stuff. And I was trying to figure out, and it was like, I just can't get this. I can't visualize this. I can visualize a circle, but I can't visualize this three-dimensional cube that I'm drawing. And I was obsessed with it. Like I would go over it and over it and over it repeatedly, just trying to figure out how to do it. And then one day, something clicked into place and I realized, oh, I got it. This is how you do it. And it seemed so easy. It was like, why did I think this was complicated? But the second I got it, I jerked awake and realized I had been asleep, that I had become so obsessed with it that I was even doing it in my sleep. I finally learned how to do the rose cross ritual in my sleep. I went to bed not understanding how to do it. I woke up knowing how to do it. Like that was how fixated my mind, my psyche was on figuring out some of these rituals of magic. The only other time in my life that I have ever experienced that is with karate. Like whenever they're teaching you, like they teach you these things, some people call them like kata. Some people call them like forms, like world form number 1, world form number 2. And when you see people doing this, it almost looks sort of like they're fighting with themselves, sort of, like almost like Tai Chi. But the difference in one of the differences in like all of those, the Chinese martial arts versus the more Japanese martial arts is the Chinese ones are more circular, like Kung Fu, Tai Chi. They're all moving in a circular motion. Whereas the Japanese and Japanese inspired ones are more linear. For example, if you're doing Tai Chi, there's a lot of these movements or these forms where you're moving around in circles. Whenever you're doing like the world forms in karate, the first one they teach you, you're moving to the left and then you're moving to the right and then you go straight ahead and then you move to the left and you move to the right. So you're basically like moving in the pattern of a big capital letter I. You've got a cross part here and a cross part here and you're walking in the middle of them. So it's like you're moving in a path on the floor in the shape of a capital I while you're doing various, arm movements and kicks and things like that. So the first time, whenever they showed me that, whenever they said, okay, this is your homework, this is what you're supposed to go home and practice. It was like, for some reason, I could not get it. I just couldn't get it. I kept trying to do this, but it was so, alien to me that I couldn't do it, but I was obsessed with it. Absolutely obsessed. Like my mind was locked onto it. And I went to bed that night and I did it all night long in my sleep. Like in my sleep, I did it over and over and over. When I woke up the next morning, I knew how to do world form number 1. I had learned it and been doing it in my sleep the same way that I did with magic. So I'm finding a lot of things about that are similar in like how I'm learning them, but I'm also learning all of these things. This is what I mean about like being on fire for this stuff and having a desire for it. It's more than just, what people think of this stuff as is like self-defense. And yes, it can be used for that, but that's not necessarily, and I'm getting to the point of how this ties more into magic. Yes, it can be used for that, just like these rituals that you're doing when you're doing magic can be used to manifest, you know, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but mundane things or material things in the world. Like you can take these rituals that are designed that have the purpose that, it's like in the Masons, there's a saying. They say that masonry can make a good man better, but it cannot make a bad man good. Like what they're saying when they're saying that is what it does is kind of when you're going through the rituals and the program of masonry, it's designed to kind of refine uh, everything about you, your psyche, your personality. It's it's supposed to change you to make you come out the other side better. Same way with magic. What magic ultimately is supposed to do, like what these rituals are designed to do, is to bring you closer and closer and closer to divinity and allow you to eventually experience the indwelling divinity within you. That being said, you can still take magic and you can slightly tweak the formula of the rituals and manifest things in the world, whether it be a better job or a better relationship or whatever it is out here, that you're wanting to change in yourself or in the world around you. You can use it for those things too. Just like with karate, yes, it can be used for self-defense, absolutely, but it's when you start to read like some of the teachings of the true masters of this tradition, you see the same thing that they talk about in like masonry and magic. And I want to read you a quote really quickly. Let me find it really fast. 1 second. So this is by a guy named Master Funakoshi. It's one of the most famous people in the history of karate. He says, the ultimate aim of karate lies not in victory or defeat, but in the perfection of the character of its participants. Karate is like boiling water. If you do not heat it constantly, it will soon start to cool. What that means is when you're doing it and when you're doing it consistently, it's going to have an effect on your physical body, like you're going to get physically stronger. It's cultivating chi, all of that sort of stuff. But it's also going to have an effect on you, like in your psyche, in your emotions. Like it is designed to make you a more disciplined kind of person. It is to perfect and refine your character, what you are, to make you better than you were when you started. Even what he said about it's like boiling water, if it's not done consistently, it starts to cool off. This is the same thing. This is the same principle of magic and alchemy. Like when you're doing alchemical experiments, that's what the fire represents. The fire that you apply to whatever it is you're putting through the alchemical process, that represents your practice. That's why the fire has to be kept at an even burning temperature at all times, not fluctuating high and low and turned off and turned on and all that sort of stuff. It's supposed to be kept even burning and consistent. That represents your practice. If your practice is even and consistent, then you're going to continue to experience these changes. You're going to keep going through the alchemical process. You're going to keep boiling. You're going to keep being refined. If you don't, if you stop, if you stop back, slack off for a while, go at it hard for a while, stop again for a while, then it's like the boiling water, it's going to cool off. You're supposed to be doing this stuff consistently. That's part of what we're going into when we're talking about these early rituals of ceremonial magic. We're talking about what the Golden Dawn called the daily rituals. These are like the kata or the world forms of magic that you're supposed to be doing every day that have these transformational effects on you. Yes, you can use them to do other things, to manifest and what have you. But even if you're not doing them for those reasons, you should still do them because they're the fire that is putting you through the alchemical process that's changing you. These beginning rituals are the middle pillar, the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. And when I say that, I include the Quabbalistic cross with the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. We covered the Quabbalistic cross already. We're going to go into the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, the lesser ritual of the hexagram, and the rose cross. Those are the 4 rituals that you're supposed to do every day. LBRP, LRH, middle pillar, rose cross. If you do those 4 every day consistently, they keep the fire burning. They cause the inner transformation to keep happening. If you stop, and don't get me wrong, most people are going to go through phases and periods whenever they slack off or stop doing it. It's just natural. We all get burned out sometimes. Life gets in the way sometimes. Sometimes we get depressed, whatever it is. Everybody goes through that stuff. But you're supposed to try to the best of your ability to keep doing those 4 rituals. And what we're going to start going into is the lesser banishing or the lesser invoking. Just call it the lesser pentagram ritual, which includes banishing and invoking, and the lesser hexagram ritual. The other thing that I saw, that I'm starting to learn in martial arts is how, one of the other kind of connections there is how most people who don't practice these things, who only know about them from like TV or, pop culture or whatever it is, they think like once you reach the level of having a black belt in one of these disciplines that you've finished, like you've kind of reached the finish line. You've reached the goal. You've reached what you're working for. And then you're done. There's nothing else for you to learn. You've reached the highest level of attainment. But in martial arts, what they tell you is when you reach the level of black belt, the only thing you have done is finished packing for your journey. Your journey is just about to start. When you reach the level of black belt, you've packed your bags and you're ready to start your journey. You have not finished your journey. You have not reached the end by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, you have just started. And ultimately, what will happen is the same thing in magic. Like in magic, by the time you reach the grade of magus, they say that you'll have your job is to tend your garden, things like that. The same way with martial arts. Like once you get to that level, you'll have started to develop your own, variations of certain things, and then eventually you'll have, theoretically, if you are truly a master, you'll have started to kind of formulate your own style, and other people are going to be drawn to you, and those are the people that you'll end up passing it on to, teaching it to. That's tending to your garden. But the same way in magic, magic has become kind of so diluted and watered down in modern times that when people are looking at the grade system of magic, Like when you're looking at the tree of life and the 10 spheres on the tree of life, like in an order or a lodge, each of those 10 spheres correspond to a different grade that you pass through, and each one has different work you're supposed to do and different things you're supposed to learn and different things you're supposed to accomplish, all that sort of stuff, all the way up until you get to Kether on the tree. And once you reach Kether on the tree, which corresponds to the grade called Ipsissimus, like Chachma is Magus, Kether is Ipsissimus. When you reach that grade, magic has become so diluted and watered down that people now think, oh, you're finished. You reached Kether, you're done. Like that's the finish line. That is not the finish line. Once you reach that highest stage represented on the tree, what you realize is that you have just started your journey. You've learned all the basic steps. It's like in karate, what they say is until you make your way all the way to black belt, essentially what you're doing is learning, to use a metaphor, you're learning a vocabulary. And once you reach the level of a black belt, you can finally use that vocabulary, those single words you've been learning, and start creating sentences. That's the same principle in magic. Once you reach the grade of Kether, you're ready to start your process. And usually, just like, giving birth to a new form of martial arts, usually you will have your own variations on the techniques of magic that will be entirely your own and will be what you're passing on to other people. So, what was the other thing? Was that it? Yeah. So I guess my point is, don't think that, with magic, it's not like there's an infinite number of rituals. There's not. Just like with martial arts, there are not an infinite number of punches or an infinite number of kicks or an infinite number of blocks. There is a finite number of these things that you're supposed to learn. And then you take those things and you try to the best of your ability to absolutely perfect them. And as you perfect them, you'll come up with your own slight twists and variations on them. Same way with magic. There are not an infinite number of rituals for you to learn. There is a very finite number of rituals for you to learn. Once you've learned them all, that's your vocabulary. And only then are you ready to start making sentences out of them. But even at that point, you're not finished by any stretch of the imagination. It's just like the alchemical process. When you put something through a distillation kit one time, pour it here, boil it, it evaporates, condenses, comes down in this container. Once it comes down in this container, it's not done. You pour it back into the distillation over here and let it go through again. Pour it back, let it go through again. Every time it goes through the process, you're going to have less and less liquid, but it's going to be more and more powerful. There's going to be more essential oils and more of the true essence of whatever you're putting through the process. So, with the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, couple of things. Number one, we talk about the Golden Dawn system of magic. Technically speaking, the Golden Dawn is not a system of magic in and of itself. It is a bunch of systems of magic all cobbled together, like someone went down an all-you-can-eat buffet and took the parts that they knew would work for certain levels of the work and put them together. What I mean by that is within the Golden Dawn system of magic, you have Enochian, you have Kabbalah, you have astrotheurgy, you even have some Indian stuff. All of those things are systems of magic entirely unto themselves. But they've taken parts of them and put them together. Like if you go into Enochian is a lifetime commitment of study and practice to learn this entire system of Enochian magic. Same way with Kabbalah. Kabbalah is a lifetime of study and practice if you choose to go that way. Same way with astrotheurgy. There's all these rituals that you have to learn, processes that you go through internally, and when you come out the other side, you're still not finished. There's a ton more that you can learn out there, usually by delving into specific areas of study, like Kabbalah, like Enochian, like astrotheurgy, whatever it is, tarot. There's a ton of them. But the thing about all of these systems, no matter which one it is, they all operate on the same basic mechanical principles. Those mechanical principles are breath, visualization, and vibration. Those are the three things behind all of them. If you master those essential mechanical techniques, you can apply them to any of these practices. That's part of what you're learning when you learn these early rituals. You're learning to master those three practices: the breath work, the visualization. And by breath work, what I'm talking about is every time you inhale, you're drawing chi from the world around you, or from objects, or from places, or whatever it is. You can, get more and more proficient at taking chi from all different kinds of sources. One of the things, for example, that we were doing so far in the Magnum Opus group. So most of y'all guys, if you're on there with me, y'all haven't done this yet. You'll see what we're talking about whenever we meet up this month. But in the first group, what we were doing was actually focusing on taking energy from stones, stones, crystals, gemstones, that sort of thing. So you can do it in all sorts of different ways once you get the practices of it down. But one of the point and purposes of doing these daily, what they call in the Golden Dawn, the daily rituals, is to help you master those practices. So what do I mean, for example, by that each of these things is a system of magic in and unto itself, and that you can use these basic underlying mechanical principles to operate on any of them? Let's take, for example, one of the things that we were covering in the Magnum Opus groups, which is the Hebrew alphabet, and how I was never any good at just sitting down and memorizing stuff. A lot of people sit down when they're looking at correspondences or whatever, like they'll sit down with a book like Crowley's 777 or whatever it is, and they sit down to just memorize correspondences like a kid getting ready to, take a geography test, and they're just studying and trying to cram it all in their head and remember it all and all that kind of stuff. And for me, that stuff, doing it that way never worked. The only way it worked for me was using this stuff. The only thing that made it stick in my head was using this stuff in a practical way. So how do you use Hebrew in a practical way? The Hebrew alphabet is part of the Kabbalistic system, and it's used in the Golden Dawn. Well, how do you use Hebrew? And I don't mean reading it. I don't mean writing it. I mean actually using it in a magical way. How do you do that? Well, the way you do that is each letter of the Hebrew alphabet corresponds or symbolizes or pertains to a specific kind of energy, either an elemental energy or a planetary energy or a zodiacal energy. So let's say, for example, you're wanting to invoke a particular energy over something or into something, whatever it is. Like, let's say you had let's just say this is a talisman, and you've got a talisman that you're wanting to invoke, let's say solar energy into. The way you would do that is the same way you would use the pentagram rituals or the hexagram rituals. You would inhale, and as you inhale, you're drawing in chi from the universe around you that passes through your body, out the soles of your feet, and into the earth. You do that several times. Keep inhaling and collecting more and more chi, seeing the chi in the earth glowing brighter and brighter and brighter. And then you would draw the letter in light of the Hebrew alphabet that corresponds to whatever energy you're trying to invoke over your talisman, almost like it's standing on top of it. Then you would inhale again and fill the earth with light, thrust your sword mudra at the letter of the Hebrew alphabet that you've drawn, and vibrate. See it flare to life even brighter and vibrate the name of the letter, whatever it is. Like I believe the one that corresponds to solar energy is, what is it, Resh? I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've used it. That's the thing. This system of magic, yeah, Chris says Resh. Angelica says Resh. Excellent. So this system of magic, honestly, was not one that particularly appealed to me. So that's why I forgot it, because I don't use it a lot. I prefer astrotheurgy, which relies on the pentagrams and the hexagrams, things like that. It goes all the way back to Babylon. But you could use like variations on the Hebrew alphabet. Like, for example, if you're using Resh to invoke solar energy, what color does solar energy correspond to? Gold. So you would draw the letter of the Hebrew alphabet in gold light. If you're using one that corresponds to, fire, you would draw it in red light. You draw it in the color light that corresponds to whatever it is you're drawing, just like you would do anything else. Same way with sigils. But those are the principles behind all of this stuff: breath work, visualization, and vibration. You see how you did everything. You inhaled, you collected chi, you collected energy through the breathing process. You used visualization to draw the whatever letter it is in light. You used vibration by thrusting your sword mudra at the letter, seeing it flare to life even brighter, and vibrating the name of the letter and seeing it vibrate. You used all these principles, just like you do with pentagram and hexagram rituals. You used it, the same exact thing, for the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The reason I'm stressing this and going over this is because this is what's important to learning these rituals. If you're looking in most books, studying most books about these rituals, most of them do not tell you this. And it's usually going to be either because whoever was writing it didn't understand this. They're just writing something that they've read in a million other books. And you would be surprised at how many people there are out there in the world of magic that do not know, that may have written a ton of books, but that do not actually understand how or why this stuff works. They've just read a ton of books and they're regurgitating whatever it is they've collected off the internet or out of these books or heard other people say or whatever it is. So they just wrote it without even understanding the underlying principles of it. That's one reason. Another reason is sometimes because they expect you to either know this or figure this out on your own. That whenever you're doing these rituals, you're supposed to know this already, that they're giving you the shorthand version. One of the books that I kind of beat you all over the head with over and over and over is this Learning Ritual Magic book by John Michael Greer, Claire Vaughn, and Earl King Jr. I've went through tons of copies of this. I've given away tons of copies of this. I keep telling y'all over and over and over, get this, get this, get this. This was a book that was instrumental in me learning this stuff. This was a book I had in prison. It was like a Bible to me. This one and Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic. These are the two, these two and probably Monsters, also by John Michael Greer, and the Encyclopedia of Natural Magic. I would say those four books are probably, the top four most, other than, I'm not counting Israel Regardie's Golden Dawn, which is the book on magic, but it's so hard to understand. These are the four books which allowed me to understand most of this stuff. The reason I bring this up again is because if you do have this book and you go to the part on doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, which is on page 51, he doesn't tell you to use the breath work. Not because he doesn't know, but because he expects you to have figured that out, because he covers all of the breath work material in an earlier chapter. So he's expecting, when he's describing this, and I'll give you an example. He says, stand facing east. In the center of the space around you, stand facing east, in the center of the space around which you will trace the pentagrams and perform the Kabbalistic cross. So stand in your space facing east. Step 2, step forward to the east until you reach the circumference of the circle. Extend the first 2 middle and index fingers of your right hand, folding the others into your palm and placing your thumb over them. He's talking about the sword mudra. That's what he just described. With these 2 fingers held together, trace a banishing pentagram in the air. Begin at the lower left and draw a line upward to the top, continuing down to the lower right, then to the left arm, the right arm, and back down to the lower left to complete the figure, which should be about 3 feet across. While tracing, visualize a line of blue-white light being traced by your fingers as they move through the air. Then point to the center of the pentagram and vibrate the divine name, Yehovah. So if you just go by that, if you hadn't read any of the other stuff, if you hadn't been practicing the breathing techniques, you're going to think all you do is go to the eastern part of the circle and do this, visualizing that you're leaving a trail of light behind you, and then you're going to poke your fingers through the middle of it and vibrate this name. Like, he's not going into all this stuff. He expects you to understand that already, to know that, to have connected those things. So same thing with the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. That's essentially how you're going to do it. This is one of those things that you should know by now, honestly. If you've gotten this far into Magick, if you're, following me, listening to this stuff, then you should probably have read about this ritual in at least 5 different books by now. You've probably looked up videos on YouTube and saw people performing it. All of this kind of stuff. This should be something that you're relatively familiar with, at least the form of how to draw the pentagrams, draw the circle of light around the room, and then invoke the angels around you in all 4 directions. The way we do it, the way that I always described, if you read my book, High Magic, I always do it with 6 angels, not 4. I do the traditional 4, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, but then above you add Metatron, and below you add Sandalphon. So it's like you're encased in a sphere of 6 with 6 angels surrounding you. When you do this, the most important part of it is using breath work and visualization. Use the breath work. I'm not going to go over the reason I'm saying this is, reading all the books about it, watching all the videos about it, is because by this point, you don't need me to go through step by step and say, step 1, go to the eastern part of the circle. Step 2, inhale and fill the earth with light. Step 3, let the light rush back up through you as you draw the banishing pentagram. Step 4, inhale and fill the earth with light. Step 5, thrust your fingers into the center of the pentagram and see it flare to life even more. Step 6, vibrate the divine name as you exhale and see the pentagram vibrating. Like, those are things you should probably understand by now. But the point of this is putting them into practice every day. The other thing that I'll give you is, if you've already done that, if you're good at that, if you've mastered that part already, if you've gotten that far already, take it to the next step of the process. The next step of the process is you're going to use not just the archangel in all 6 directions. You're going to use the archangel, you're going to use the angel, you're going to use the ruler, and you're going to use the king. So let me see if I have my paperwork around here with me. I do. You're in luck. So this, people always ask, where do I find this? Where do I find these names? Where does this come from? Number one, I got this from combing through all the Golden Dawn material. years of reading through it. If you read Israel Regarde's book about the Golden Dawn system of magic, you're going to find all of this in there. You're going to find the archangel. You're going to find the angel. You're going to find the ruler. You're going to find the king or the queen of the elementals. It's all in there. You can probably also find it anywhere online. This is not some big kept secret or anything. This is not some great mystery. This stuff is everywhere out there. You just have to want it bad enough to look for it. And to be honest with you, most people don't. Most people they're not that hungry for it. That's the key to getting far in magic, is you got to be hungry for it. You got to want this shit. That's what makes you dream about it. That's what makes you just driven, just refusing to quit because you need it. You're hungry for it. Thing about this, though, another thing that I wanted to explain tonight, to go into a little bit, is the analysis of the keyword, but not the ritual, the analysis of the keyword. The analysis of the keyword is a part of a ritual that goes along. Yep, Baitner says you are either desperate for it or not. That's exactly it. You are either starving for this or you're not. But with the analysis of the keyword, the reason I'm bringing this up, the analysis of the keyword is a part of it's something you do with the lesser hexagram ritual that kind of takes the place of the quabbalistic cross. When you're doing the lesser pentagram ritual, you start with the quabbalistic cross and end with the quabbalistic cross, and you're doing the LBRP or the lesser invoking in the middle. With the lesser hexagram ritual, you're starting and ending with a ritual called the analysis of the keyword. What that is, the keyword is LVX. It's Latin for light. But they say that this word, LVX, Latin for light, all of these rituals are symbolic. They are metaphors. They are like codes that you have to understand the code if you're going to get the most out of them that you can. So let's say, for example, one of the things about the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, if you're new on here, if you weren't with me back when we talked about this, you should comb back through these archives. There's like 6 years of videos and writings and stuff on here by now, but you should comb back through these archives and find a video I did. I may have even released it on YouTube a while back. I can't remember for sure, but it was called Deeper into the LBRP, I believe is what I called it. But in it, I talk about the concept of squaring the circle and how it's this mathematical conundrum that's expressed in a bunch of different ways, like Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, the man with his arms and legs out, standing in the circle in the square, all of that. What it comes down to is philosophers always wrestled with how to unite the circle and the square, how to marry them together, make them one thing. Why is that important? What the hell does that mean? Well, the circle represents divinity because it has no beginning and no end. The square represents the physical world. Each of the four corners of the square represents the four elements. If you unite the circle and the square, what have you done? You have merged the divine world and the material world into one thing. That's what you're doing when you do the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. That's what all the symbolism is. Keep in mind, you've got a circle that you're drawing around you, and you have a square because you've got the four directions and the four archangels and the four divine names and all that sort of stuff. Another thing you'll see repeated is the infinite, which never changes, and the finite or the material, which is always changing. How is that represented? Well, in the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, you're drawing 4 pentagrams. You're drawing the exact same shape, unchanging in all 4 directions. But you're invoking a different divine name in each direction. The divine name changes. The shape that you're drawing does not. So once again, it's symbolic of the changing material world and the unchanging infinite world being merged and married. The same way with the lesser hexagram ritual, you just have it in the opposite form. You're drawing a different hexagram in each direction. And this is something we'll get into later. I didn't draw it out tonight because most people, when they think of hexagrams, they just think of a 6-pointed star. But when you're doing the lesser hexagram rituals, you're using all different kinds of shapes that are just 2 triangles that are overlapping or interlocking in a bunch of different formations. So with the lesser hexagram ritual, you're drawing a different shape in all 4 directions, but you're invoking the same divine name, Ararita, for all 4. That's what you're charging them with. So the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, you have the changing and the unchanging. The lesser banishing ritual, the hexagram, you have the changing and the unchanging married together in one. The finite and the infinite union in union. But this symbolism is also inherent in the analysis of the keyword. And this ties into what we're talking about here. So when you're doing the analysis of the keyword, you start off talking about L. You're spelling this out with your body. As you're reciting this invocation, you're spelling out LVX with your body. L is the sign that corresponds to Isis, the Egyptian goddess Isis. V is Typhon, the Egyptian goddess of Egyptian god of destruction. X is Osiris, the Egyptian god of resurrection, of rebirth. LVX. So you're going through this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Light, darkness, and light. Different kinds of light on each end. What that represents is how all of life, all of existence is cyclical in nature. Everything is a cycle. There's this cycle of things beginning. This is L. This is Isis. Things beginning, things growing. There's the cycle of V, Typhon, of things being destroyed, of darkness. That's what it is. The destructive aspect is darkness setting in. And then you have X, the dawning of the light, the rebirth of the light after the darkness. So say, for example, when you're working with these rituals, in the beginning, sometimes people will say, well, I'm not going to start trying to do it until after I understand it completely. And I'm going to read a bunch of books, and I'm going to watch a bunch of videos, and I'm going to listen to a bunch of people talk about it because I really just don't understand it. I can't grasp it. I can't comprehend it. And I'm not going to start doing it until I can really understand it. Those are the people who will never start. What it is that makes you understand this stuff is doing it. Saying I'm not going to start until I fully understand it is like saying I'm not going to do algebra. I'm never going to work on an algebra problem until I fully understand everything about it and just look at it and understand it. The only thing that allows you to understand complex mathematics is doing them, repetitively doing them. Because what that does is forces your brain, your psyche, your consciousness to form all kinds of new connections that lead to different ways of your mind working, firing, sending and processing information. Doing these rituals does the exact same thing. When you do these rituals, your confusion will clear up. If you don't do them It'll never clear up. No matter how many people you hear explain this, no matter how many books you read about it, you're still going to be in a state of like trying to just get a handhold on this stuff and get some kind of understanding about it. It's not going to happen. You have to do the work in order to understand the work, just like with math. So in the beginning, you learn about magic. You learn it's possible to change things. It's possible to change yourself. It's possible to change the world and manifest things and all kinds of stuff. And you're excited at the infinite possibility that you have discovered. But then when you start trying to go a little bit deeper, go under the surface, try to understand, how does this stuff work? Why does this stuff work? What exactly does this ritual do? Why am I doing this? I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to understand this. Just like when I first started this live stream, I was talking about the Rose Cross ritual and how I felt like I'm never going to, I just can't get this. I can't figure this out. That's the way you will reach a point where you feel about magic. That's the dark phase. That's the V phase. That's the Typhon phase. But if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, just doing the rituals anyway, keep studying, keep practicing, slowly realization is going to dawn. That fog of confusion is going to evaporate. And you're going to see the light. You're going to understand it. Just like when I woke up out of a dead sleep, suddenly knowing how to do the Rose Cross ritual. So that's the 3 stages of LVX. That's the formula of LVX in the process of magic. But it's not just in magic, it's in everything. This process is in everything. Everything is cyclical in nature. And let's say, for example, trying to think of like concrete metaphorical examples that will allow you to kind of see this in all things. The point of seeing it in all things is because you realize when you can see everything in this formula, it doesn't shake you as much. You realize that it's just part of natural life. You realize, okay, this is just how things work. So let's say, for example, you hate your job and you feel like you don't have enough money to live the kind of life that you want to live, to take the classes you want to take and go to the places and see the kind of things you want to see and have the experiences you want to live. You just feel like you hate your job, it's not fulfilling, and you don't have the money to do all those things. So you start doing magic for that purpose. You start doing magic, let's just say, to manifest more prosperity, more financial abundance. And it comes. And in the beginning, it's amazing. It's great. I'm not in poverty anymore. I have them, it's like, oh, I can suddenly afford things that I've always wanted to do. I can afford to go places I've always wanted to go. Whatever it is, you've come into this time of abundance and prosperity, and suddenly things open up to you. Well, one of 2 things is going to happen, because that's the L phase. That's the light phase. The darkness has to come next. What's the darkness in that situation, in that scenario? Could be a couple of different things. It could be, number one, that you didn't really learn what it was that led you into that state that you were in to begin with in the first place, and you keep doing the same things you always did, and the next thing you know, you haven't changed your spending habits, you haven't changed your saving habits, you haven't changed anything about yourself, and eventually you've frittered that money away and you're back to being broke again, and you got to start over from scratch. Or That doesn't happen. You remain financially prosperous, but you realize this isn't the be all and the end all. You know, I still feel like there's a hole in me or in my life. Like this isn't full. Like in the beginning, the excitement of it is going to distract you from the fact that this still is not your will. You're still not fulfilled. Eventually that's going to dawn on you. You're like, okay, I'm financially prosperous now, but the work that I'm doing still isn't fulfilling me on a soul level. What do I do? Do I sell my soul and keep working this job that I hate, that I feel like isn't really productive just because it's making me more financially prosperous, but I'm still feeling like, you know, my life, like my work is just meaningless? Or do I quit and go off on my own and try to figure out what to do next, whatever it is? And you'll wrestle with that. That's your time of darkness. That's the dark night of the soul. And then the light comes again. The resurrection comes again. The resurrection is you figuring out what comes next. Your next step. And it'll be unique unto you. My point with all this is what LVX is describing. I hope this isn't too abstract. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here, or what I'm at least trying to say, what I'm pointing to. My whole point is that this is the cycle of life. The time of light, the time of darkness and confusion. And then if you keep going, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, eventually you find your way back to the light. This was one of the things, even, you see this tattoo on my arm? This is a hexagram from the I Ching. It means wind over heaven. Yes, the times of darkness will always come. That's the cycle of life. It is inevitable. But the difference in the neophyte and the master is the master doesn't struggle with the darkness. He knows it's part of the cycle. It's part of the way things work. He's got a higher vantage point, so he doesn't fight against it. But what this represents, wind over heaven, the nickname of it is the taming power of the small. What it means is when you're facing a huge obstacle, when you're trying to climb a huge mountain, you're not always going to be able to take huge steps. You're not always going to be able to transcend it in a really quick, speedy way. Sometimes the only thing you can do in life is take tiny steps. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. And it's by doing that, by just doing what you can do in this moment, even if it's not a huge thing, if it's just a small thing, you keep doing that. And taking those one small, tiny steps is what will eventually get you to the other side of the mountain. That's the taming power of the small. That's why I got that tattoo. That hexagram is to remind you of how powerful just taking tiny incremental steps. Yes, Sarah says eating an elephant one bite at a time. Yes, eating an elephant one bite at a time. That is a perfect way to put it. That's what allows you to eventually get to the other side. Just, yes, yep, Sunshine says punch what's in front of you. Exactly. Give me 1 second. I want to read through y'all's comments. I'm going to scroll back a little bit and just see what y'all have been talking about. See if there's any questions. Let's see. Okay, so Angie says, so I have a question. Seeing as it goes Archangel, Angel, Ruler, King, Would it be before me, archangel, behind me, ruler, at my right hand, angel, at my left hand, king? You can do it in any of those variations. You know, let's say, for example, you're invoking just air or just the east. Oh, the reason I brought this up is I was going to tell you the next step of doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. Don't look at the stuff in the corners here. Those are planetary things, and we're not including that yet. That's like the next step of the process. If you're more interested in that, you should get my book, Angels and Archangels. This is part of the practice that I call the celestial lotus in there. And I'm going to shut up in a few minutes. I'm not going to go on forever, but I want to explain this to you real quick for those of you who are proficient at doing the LBRP, who have already mastered that aspect of it and want to take it up to the next level. This is the next level. You know how whenever you do the normal invocation, you invoke just the 4 archangels around you? For the expanded version of this, and I cannot recommend to you enough to do this, if you have mastered the LBRP, you want to go to this next level. This is where you start experiencing all kinds of amazing things when you push beyond the basics. So what you would do in the expanded version, which is what this is you're going to invoke all 4 entities associated with each element in their proper quarter. So you know how normally you would say before me, and you would inhale and you would see a towering pillar of yellow light and you would vibrate Raphael. Well, after you do that, then you're going to inhale again and see a second towering pillar of yellow light expand behind Raphael and vibrate Chasan. And then you're going to inhale again and see a third towering pillar of yellow light expand beyond him. And you're going to vibrate Ariel. And then you're going to inhale a 4th time and see a 4th towering pillar of yellow light extending all the way across the room and as high as you can see above you, and vibrate Paralda. And every time you vibrate it, you're seeing the pillar of light vibrate and glow even brighter with the force of the word. So you're going to do all 4 of them in front of you. Raphael, Chasan, Ariel, Paralda. All 4 of them in the east. Behind you, you're going to do Gabriel, Taliahad, Tharsis, and Nixa. Same thing, one after the other, until you've got 4 towering pillars of blue light behind you and you vibrated all those names. And then you're going to, on your right hand, Mikael, Aral, Seraph, and Jinn. All 4 of them on your right hand. On your left hand, Uriel, Forlak, Carib, Gob. And if you don't want to go through the work of, I'm holding this up right here so that you can screenshot it, put my face behind it so it's not distracting you, so that you've got this diagram. I've put this up here before. I've posted it before on Patreon, but you might have to dig through years back to find it. But you can screenshot this and have all of the names. One thing left out, though, is you want to add above you and below you. Above you, you're going to add Metatron, towering pillar of crystal white light. Then you're going to inhale again and see a second towering crystal white pillar form, and you're going to vibrate Kaoth Ha Kodesh. And then you're going to inhale and see a third towering pillar of white light, and you're going to vibrate Kaoth Ha Kodesh. And then you're going to inhale the 4th time and see a towering pillar of crystal light and vibrate Kaoth Ha Kodesh. Kaoth Ha Kodesh is the angelic choir associated with Kether. The spheres on the tree do not have kings, rulers, all of that. What they have is an angelic choir. And that's how you use them. You want to keep it balanced. So you've got Metatron and 3 Chaos HaKodesh above you. Below you, you have Sandalphon, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to inhale and visualize 3 more pillars of like beige, light brown light beneath you, and you're going to vibrate Ashim for each of them, because the Ashim are the angelic choir associated with Malkuth. So that's the expanded version of this. If you are proficient at doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, you need to move ahead and start doing this. This is the next step on the process. Once we get through all of these basic rituals, we'll talk a little bit on our next lesson. We'll talk a little bit about the lesser hexagram ritual and a little bit about the Rose Cross ritual. There's not a lot to explain about the Rose Cross ritual, actually, but we'll talk about those things. I think we covered, did we cover the middle pillar already? I can't remember. And I'm going to keep reading through y'all's comments. And John, you are just off the chain tonight. I see you talking about bringing the king, Charles. Yep, exactly, Holly. Holly says many Orthodox churches are designed with the circle or dome and the square being the building beneath. Exactly. That's what Orthodox churches are. They represent the union of the square and the circle. The dome on top is the circle. The square at the bottom where the people sit is the square. But that's also the karate tournament that I was just at. It took place in the auditorium of an Orthodox church. When I saw that, I felt like that was some kind of sign, like that was something amazing, you know, that it was just too good to be true. You know, the fact that not only am I getting to compete in this tournament, but it's inside an Orthodox church. So Deborah Callahan says, I've been a nurse all my life, but can't seem to find my real purpose. Also have trouble getting distracted when doing any deep thinking, visualizing. The first point and the first clue to finding your purpose is, what do you enjoy? What gives you joy? What do you love doing? What makes you excited to be alive? That's your first clue as to what your purpose is. I can't tell you what your purpose is. Nobody in this world can tell you what your purpose is, because only you know what it is that sets you on fire, lights you up, makes you, you know, thankful to get up in the morning and get started on another day. You've got to look inside yourself and ask yourself that and figure that out for yourself. No one can tell you what your purpose is, but you know what it is. You've just got to scratch a little bit. You've got to look below the surface. Yep, Billy says learning how to play music is the same process. It seems so complex studying it, but it starts to make sense if you just do it. So many things in life are exactly that way. Give me 1 second. I'm just reading y'all's comments. One second. Yes, Angelica, that is brilliant. And that's really good. You're talking about writing the essays. That's keep doing that. Yes. And Mathea says generate, order, destroy. Exactly. Same thing as the LVX. One second. Yep, Angie, that's what you said about Getting approving for help with your disability, but now you're feeling overwhelmed, all that. That is it exactly. That's the LVX. One second, guys. I know it's weird with me just sitting here staring at you, but I'm just reading what y'all are saying. You see, hold on. Yeah, Bake Nurse has a point too. She says, your purpose isn't just one thing. Mine is many things as I go through life. Yes, that is absolutely 100% true also. I think most people don't live a lot, to be honest. You know, most people don't really pour themselves into life and exhaust one thing. I think some people, their purpose in life can be just one thing, just because they're never going to exhaust it. They're never going to, you know, completely just pursue it and pour themselves into it. I think if you do that, if you completely just pour yourself into it, you'll exhaust whatever it is that your purpose was, and you'll get to go on to the next one. For most people, they'll have to wait for another lifetime in order to do that. You know, like me, pouring myself into writing those books on magic, it's like I felt like I exhausted that process. I mean, I've done so many different things since I've been out. I used to do visual art. I did art shows all over, not just the United States, but all over the world, you know, in Europe, in the US, wherever. And I exhausted what I had to do, what I had to say, and what I had to learn through the vehicle of visual art. And I left it behind and never did it again. I've written now 8 books. I won't say absolutely that I'll never write another one, because, you know, it's like never name the well from which you will not drink. Maybe something happens somewhere down the road and I end up writing another one, but I don't see myself doing it. Honestly, I feel like I exhausted that vehicle. I exhausted everything that there was for me to get out of it. I've for 2 years, one time I did public speaking nonstop. I lived on the road just doing public speaking. And I felt like I exhausted everything I had to say about the legal system and the case and all that kind of stuff. Um, some people don't ever exhaust things. For the people that don't exhaust things, I think they'll work on one thing their whole life to wring every ounce of wisdom and growth and everything there is out of it. People who do completely just get obsessed with things and exhaust things, they can move through several in one lifetime. So Jacob Kennedy says, when finishing powerful rituals like the supreme ritual of the pentagram and just wanting to opt out of practical asks, meaning not doing it for practical purposes, what exactly do you mean by defaulting to spiritual sustenance? You say, protect, guide, and illuminate me. May all of this power, blessings, and favor descend upon this cup of water, or descend upon me, whatever it is, in order to protect, guide, and illuminate me. You're asking the magic to protect you, to guide you, and to illuminate you, to give you epiphanies, realizations. That's spiritual sustenance. Just absorb the energy of it. That's all that means. So Gnome Wall says, when learning to do the self-initiation ritual for 6 months, should you have already been doing the lesser hexagram ritual for some time, or should you start doing the lesser hexagram ritual after 6 months of the self-initiation? That's entirely up to you. You can do it either way. You could do the self-initiation ritual using both the pentagram and the hexagram ritual. Not just the pentagram ritual, but do it with both of them. Do it for 6 months with just pentagram ritual, then do it for the next 6 months using both the pentagram and the hexagram rituals. Andrea says, what about a book of compiled stories? A book of stories that pulled together moments of your life that were profound or helped shape you. It's like I said, never name the cup from which you will not drink. I'm not saying that I will never absolutely write another book, but I just don't see myself at this point in time. I just don't see myself doing it anymore. You know, it's just not something that calls to me. Maybe one day it will. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll go on all kinds of other adventures and learn all kinds of other new things, and I'll have all kinds of other stories to talk about. But right now, honestly, it's I feel like talking to y'all, doing this stuff, telling y'all my stories. This is me tending to my garden. Like I'm just not that interested in reaching the world anymore. You know, for me, this is sustenance. This is what I enjoy doing, talking to y'all. I can talk to y'all and have these conversations in a really like unself-conscious way. Like this doesn't feel like doing an interview, you know, with people that are watching your every move and judging your every word and all of that kind of stuff. This is just like us sitting around talking. And to me, honestly, this is far more enjoyable and like feeds me more than reaching random people that I don't know in the outside world. If that makes any sense. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you for listening to my stories, for caring about them. A lot of people would probably just think they're completely crazy or weird. Okay, I'm going to shut up because we're already an hour and a half deep in here, and I don't want to keep y'all on here all night long with rambling. Yeah, John, I would talk about that. John says, would you ever go into your lifestyle more? I'd be interested in things like your diet, herbs you might use during rituals, etc. Yeah, yeah, I would talk about that stuff. Yeah. All right, guys. I am going to get off of here and let y'all go about your business. Another thing we are going to talk about soon. I'm trying to like at least go through the daily rituals and get y'all up to par before we go into invoking Earth to uh, consecrate and bless and charge our this talisman, or not talisman, seal of the seven archangels that I said we all could use just to link us all together. We are going to get to this. We are going to talk about this. But in order to do this, you have to be able to do these basic rituals first. So I'm just leading y'all through those before we get to this. Thank you, Gannicus. All right, guys. I love y'all. Thank you for bearing with me, for putting up with me, for wanting to be on here and go through this journey with me. I will talk to y'all in a couple of days. Take care, and I will see you soon.